Now I'm going live. I think. Yeah, here we go.
I think. Oh, this meeting is being live streamed. Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
At a certain point, we're gonna figure this out. At a certain point.
We're on. We figured it out. Okay. Rabbi Sprung, welcome back. We have been gone for quite a while.
This meeting is being live streamed.
So it's good to. No, it was the feedback, but it's good to see you again. It's been a month and a half since we've been online.
So long. I blame you, obviously.
Yes, it's definitely me who got a new position at the school and was very busy and everything. I
see what you did.
Yeah, see that? I'm blaming you. Okay, today's episode, we're going to discuss whether Zionism is racist, which was the opinion of the United Nations.
The Durban Conference, right? The Durban Conference,
and is still the opinion of many people that Zionism is racist. It's the opinion of many people that Zionism is exclusionary, right? It's elitist. Zionism is made. The idea behind it is that Zionism is made directly to establish the Jewish people to have their own Jewish state, the land that falls between the river and the sea, what we call the land of Israel. Right. Excludes other people. That does not allow other people. That's just Jews. Now, Rabbi Sprung, let me ask you: are you of the opinion that Zionism is racist? Because I'll let you go first, then I have to take the opposite.
Oh. Well, so I don't understand what Zionism has to do with race. The Zionism is, at least as far as I understand it, and I'm sure that different people can think about it differently. Zionism to me means the right for the people of Israel to self-determine. I say the people of Israel. I don't like saying Jews because the Torah calls us Bnei Yisrael, but if you want, like, we can use the terms interchangeably. The ability for Jews to self-determine. One of the reasons that I don't like the term Zionism is because everyone else just calls it self-determination. When you put an ism on it, then all sorts of people don't like it. It's just called self-determination. Every single people has a right to self-determination. Jews are a people, they have a right to self-determination. No different than the Americans or the French. So there are white Jews and black Jews and tall Jews and short Jews and fat Jews and skinny Jews. It has nothing to do with race. I don't know why elitism would factor in. People might say that, well, it's exclusionary because it excludes people who are not Jews. Well, that might be a good point, other than the fact that you don't have to be Jewish to live in the state of Israel, number one. And number two,
or be a citizen.
That's what I'm saying. Oh, right. When I said, yes, I meant it that way, but you're correct, more accurate. And why would that be any different than saying that a non-American citizen does not have the right to vote in the United States of America? That's elitist, because only Americans get the right to vote in America, or only French people get the right to vote in France. Yes, the French people self-determine in France, and this is what constitutes a French person. So I don't really see, how it would constitute racism, exceptionalism, elitism, or anything else really. But feel free to push back.
Well, so I think that, obviously I'm of similar opinion as you on this matter. I don't think you're going to find anybody that's pro-Israel that's going to come out and say that Zionism is racism. But what I want to do is, and something that I've been doing in my own studying over the past month, is separating the idea behind Zionism and being pro-Israel, right? In other words, and I want to rewind, and this is what I've been doing in my own life for probably 6 weeks now, is rewind to pre-1948 Zionism. And the reason I'm doing that is because number one, I got hired to, but number two, also because that what I'm trying to understand is the philosophy behind the state of Israel, right? That's the philosophy behind the state of Israel is built on thousands of years beforehand and is constantly being developed. But there was a short period of time, a very small short period of time, maybe 50 years, maybe 60 years, 70 years, that a group of people, which got larger and larger and larger, came up with a movement built on a very specific philosophy, and they all came at it from different angles, right? All different places, but they all called it the same thing. They had the ism. They called it Zionism, and the idea was to establish a Jewish state. Today, when you look back like some 74 years later as what that state is, it's exactly as you described it. Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, all living together as citizens of the state of Israel, right? But the state, the philosophy behind the state was not to create a space where all of those people could come together and become citizens. It was designed for Jews to come back. And in that sense, there's only one group of people or religion, depending on how you look at it, but really one group of human beings that is allowed automatic entrance into the state of Israel, and nobody else but those people are.
Right.
Those people, the only common denominator that they have is they're Jewish.
Yes. Yes. So I think that I addressed that point when I said that a Canadian does not get to vote in an American election. That doesn't make citizenship of the United States of America elitist or exceptional or racist. It means that in order to vote in America, you have to be American. America is a nation. They have laws that govern who is American and who is not American. Anyone who's American has access to the exact same laws that every other American has access to. So the same way that there's an American nation, there's a Jewish nation. And the Jewish nation has the right to self-determination in their country, the same way that the American nation has the right to self-determine in theirs. I don't see a difference there. Now, if you say that it's a function of religious affiliation, so as you know, Judaism is not a religion. It was never a religion. It's not meant to be a religion. People misunderstand that. It's not a religious issue. Not to mention the fact that Jews don't have to be religious to claim the right of return to Israel. In fact, most of the Jews in Israel are not religious people. They're secular. They are, as we say, chilonim. Those people don't recognize that term. They're secular Jews. So it's not a religious issue. It's a national issue.
I would push back on it and say, okay, true. Everything you've said is true, but it's discounting the one point, which is non-citizens and how they become citizens, right? So if I'm standing in France and I'm standing in America and I'm standing in Mexico and I want to move to Israel, the answer that you can move to Israel is only going to come automatically as a yes if you have one thing, if you are Jewish. So there's no such really analogy in any other type of thing, because in order to become an American, right, you have to actually come to America. You can't be an American in France.
I understand, but I don't think that's analogous, because what the right of return would be akin to, I'll give you an example. My eldest son, Yehuda, was not born in the United States of America. He was born in Jerusalem, but he was American from birth by virtue of his father, right? Because the Constitution says that if your dad's American, then you're American, okay? So what right did he have to be American? The answer is, what do you mean, what right did he have? The Constitution determines that you are American if your dad's American, even if you've never been to America. So the Israeli, they don't have a constitution, but the Israeli equivalent of right of return is saying you're already Israeli, you're just French. So my children, for example, my subsequent children that were all born in Miami, so Donnie and David and Shira and Yonatan and Tamar, are also, they can get an Israeli passport if they want by virtue of their mother. They don't have to claim right of return. Their mom's Israeli. So boom, they're Israeli. There's no difference. So you'd say, yeah, but here it's a little bit different because it's not your father. We're saying, well, you're Jewish and you haven't been in this land in 1,500 years. Why do you get automatic right of return? That's a great point. Did you hear that Chappelle joke? Did you see the Chappelle special? Oh man, you know what I'm talking about? Do you know who Dave Chappelle is, Billy?
I know who Dave Chappelle is. Yes, I know who Dave Chappelle is. I know Dave Chappelle. I've watched a lot of Dave Chappelle. I know his history of turning down $50 million for. Yeah, I know. I'm up on Dave Chappelle. I just didn't watch the special.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm totally modern American.
Okay,
culture.
well, I appreciate that. And I'm so happy to hear it. I'm proud of you. So in his recent special, he told a rather funny joke.
Oh, anti-Semitic. He was accused of somewhat of anti-Semitism.
It's not anti-Semitic.
I said he was accused of anti-Semitism. I say it was anti-Semitic.
For sure, for sure. Because 2022, whatever. But his joke was funny, and his joke was about these people that left the Earth and went on a space journey for thousands of years, and then decided they don't like it, and they came back and they wanted to reclaim the Earth. And I call the movie Space Jews. That obviously he said it much more funny than I did, and it was funny. But the reason that rankles people, the reason that it bothers people, like, oh my God, it's anti-Semitism. Right? It's not anti-Semitism. Here is the bait and switch in his joke. The bait and switch is that the analogy to the Jewish people is that the Jewish people lived in the land of Israel, and one day they said, you know what, there are not enough waterfalls here in the Middle East. Why don't we go and traverse Europe and go to a better homeland in Europe, and we're going to go there for a few thousand years. And then they were there for a couple thousand years and like, you know what? Why don't we go back and reclaim the land from the people who took it after we abandoned it? That is not what happened. It's not the truth. That's not what happened. So it's a funny joke, but what happened was here are a bunch of Jewish people living here, and a barbarian horde of conquerors came in and murdered them all and threw the other ones out. And then all of those people who are saying all sorts of terrible things about us today were the ones who played keep away for 2,000 years. And every single Jewish person everywhere in the world, several times a year, said, next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem. And 3 times a day faced Jerusalem and prayed. And then they walked back into their own house. That's what happened. So it's not the same thing.
Yeah, but I'm gonna continue to push back, and I'm gonna say true, but Muhammad lived in Jerusalem in 1946. In 1947, he left, and Muhammad's son, who's the equivalent of Donnie in this, Donnie Sprung in this thing, wants to come back to Israel and can't.
Love it. That's a great point.
Why can't he come back?
I'll tell you. I think it's an excellent question. So Muhammad owned a house in Jerusalem. He owned a house in Jerusalem, and he was thrown out of that house. That is absolutely true. Totally accurate. Muhammad owned a house. Muhammad is an individual. He is not a nation or nationality. He is an individual that owned a house. If you live in Florida, which is in the United States, and Florida is conquered by Cuba, that means that Florida is now Cuban. Well, Florida is Cuban, but you get the point. Florida is now Cuban, and the individuals who lived in Florida, who are American, who were thrown out of their houses, I mean, it stinks for them. It stinks for them, but they don't have a national right of return. It's an individual whose country lost, and therefore they're gone.
Well, so I don't know. As a pro-Israel advocate, that argument is not a winning one.
I'm not a pro-Israel advocate. I'm just sprung.
So I'll tell you, that's not an argument I would ever make.
Tell me.
Because the idea that we've conquered, we won, you're lost, is not really one that's you can take that argument. It's definitely the argument of the Torah's viewpoint, but yeah, I think the argument that has to be phrased in a much different way.
Well, what is it that I'm trying to say? I'm not saying we conquered, we won, you lost. I'm saying that your claim to your house is accurate and true, and it's an individual claim.
Why won't Israel let him come back to his house then?
The question is why Jordan lost Jerusalem.
Israel will not. Let's say it's Jaffa, whatever, wherever.
Right. Cuba. So Cuba had a war with America, and Cuba now owns Florida. So all the Americans that used to live in Florida have been evicted because their country lost.
So Muhammad, let's say even wasn't evicted, but there's a guy in Brooklyn, Pilichowski, who's allowed to move back to Israel. He's never been there, and his no relative that he even knows of ever lived there, because the last relative of this guy that he's claiming to live there was thousands of years ago, right?
Right.
So now the state of Israel says, okay, Pilichowski, you can automatically step in, you're a citizen day one. Muhammad, you're not even allowed in.
Right. So again, the American is saying that all people who are American have a right to come live in America. We're saying you, in this case, you, Francois, are not American, and therefore you could buy a house in America, but you're not American.
Why is Pilichowski Israeli?
Pilichowski is Israeli because according to the founding documents of this country, anyone who is from the Jewish nation.
So I'm saying the founding documents are exclusionary. They exclude
the founding documents are exclusive and exclusionary, just like every nation has self-determination on their nation. So the American right.
So yes, every country can exclude all foreigners, right? But what makes Pilichowski not a foreigner that they're allowing him in?
So that's what I'm explaining to you.
How are they determining the nationality?
We're saying that the nationality of Bnei Yisrael has nothing to do with where you were born. You are just as much a Yisrael if you were born in Toronto or if you were born in Bethlehem. You are a Yisrael, and therefore all Yisrael are citizens of Eretz Yisrael the same way that an American who's born abroad to American parents is American. Doesn't matter where you're born, you're American from a national perspective. That's all it means. So I don't see a difference there. Unless you say to me, yeah, but America doesn't claim you're American after 10,000 generations of living somewhere else and forgetting your Americanism. That's true, and I agree with that. I don't think that's analogous to the Jewish story, but every nation can make whatever laws they want as long as they, are consistent within those laws. So I don't think it's a problem why the Jewish state would say anyone who's Jewish is all automatically a citizen and therefore can claim citizenship, and people who aren't cannot. Doesn't mean that Israel hates Mexicans. Like, well, how come not every Mexican is granted automatic citizenship to Israel? Because they're Mexican. Like, they have a country, it's called Mexico. So I don't see.
Okay, so I think that's where you fall into a pitfall. The Palestinian doesn't have a country.
Excuse me?
The Palestinian doesn't have a country.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was confused. So
Muhammad, who lived in Palestine and Jaffa.
Let me help you with this. And I know this is like horribly offensive and people don't like to hear this, but it's the truth. It's the truth. What's a Palestinian? There is no such nationality.
That's right. That
does not exist.
So what is Muhammad? Muhammad lived in Jaffa from the year 4. His family lived in Jaffa from 1860 until 1947. So what is
Turkish? Arab? He's Arab.
He never had Turkish citizenship, and Arab is not a nation. It's not.
What do you mean he never had a Turkish passport? My great-grandfather.
He was never a Turkish citizen.
Yes, he was.
No, he wasn't.
My great-grandfather lived in Palestine under the Turks. He was a citizen of Turkey.
But those weren't citizens of Turkey. They weren't granted citizenship of Turkey. They lived in the protectorate of Turkey, but they weren't. They weren't Turkish citizens. There was no Turkey.
Well, he was certainly under he was under the auspices of the Turkish government. Certainly, it was Turkey.
No, so I'm saying there was no. So there was no country Turkey. It was just the Ottoman Empire. So there's no. So the Ottoman Empire's gone. Right, they're gone in 1917. So he loses whatever he has to the Ottoman Empire. He's in British Mandate. He leaves the British Mandate before the Zionists take over. Now he's living in America and he wants to come back. And you're saying you can't because you have a homeland, you have a nation. But I don't have a nation.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying there's no such thing as a person who's disenfranchised. I'm not saying that everyone has a nation. I'm saying that people that do have a nation and a homeland are welcome to go back to their nation and their homeland. I'm not saying that everyone has a nation and a homeland. There could be people who are disenfranchised. That's true, and it's sad and it's real. But the fact that this happens to be a particular person's homeland doesn't mean that everyone has access to it. The people who are within that nation have access to that homeland. It's consistent. So you're saying, but what about these people who are disenfranchised and don't have any country? That's horrible.
Right.
That's very sad. That's totally sad. Like I don't think.
So now you've created a state where they lived. Right.
I didn't create a state where they lived.
That's what I'm saying. That's what the Jews did. The Jews created a state over where they lived. So now they can't create it where they lived.
Yeah. So
you're excluding them from coming.
Claim to have made a state. This is a very, very old state that has been there for a very, very long time, and its borders are recognizable and listed. And its history is there and written. And did I make a state or did I reestablish a state? Because, well, I mean, as much as this pains me, because like the United Nations mandate and stuff, it really does make me vomit in my mouth. The fact that Jews think they have the right to the land of Israel because the United Nations said so. Like I can taste the bile in the back of my throat. I care not a hoot for the United Nations. I think that they could have been something great, and maybe one day that they will be, but they're not the ones who give me a right to live in the land of Israel. Give me a break. That's insane. Don't give me that right. This is my land. So do I think that Muhammad from East Jerusalem might have a claim on either the Jordanian government or the Israeli government for payment on his particular house? Maybe that could be. It's not a national claim. It's not a claim that you get to live there. You don't get to live there. Are you saying that the Jordanian government might have to pay you reparations? Maybe they do. You saying the Israeli government might have to pay you reparations for your house? Maybe they do. But that's very different.
Okay, so let's bring this back, right? Let's bring this back now to the original discussion. So your claim is that Israel is not Zionism, the philosophy of Zionism, not the state of Israel, but the philosophy of Zionism. Let's go back to that and not what's happening today. But the philosophy of we're going to establish a state just for the Jewish people is not exclusionary.
We're going to establish a state of France for the French people.
No,
it's exclusionary to anyone who's not French.
No, because right, okay, so right, okay. So I guess
it just means self-determination. That's all.
Right. So I guess what I'm getting hung up on is the fact that what you're trying to establish, and it doesn't allow for. It's a good move because it doesn't allow for anybody to wiggle waggle here. If I look at this, I say, okay, fine, but French people are only French because they're living in France, or like you brought up the international law that if your parents are French, you become French, right? Okay, but French people are only French because they live in France, and Israelis though, right, are right. So I would say Israel, like to become an Israeli citizen, is Jewish, and as I go from Israeli to Jewish, you don't like that. You say no. There's no such difference. That's an artificial difference.
It's a contrived difference. It's not true. The Torah does not call us Jews.
Right. So it's amazing.
Jews.
Well, what's amazing and frankly to me very sad is that you have literally millions of Jews who would disagree with that and say no, right? I am not Jew. I am not Israeli. I have nothing to do with that horrible place over there. I am Jewish, and I am not, Israeli whatsoever.
Right. I don't think we can call that a disagreement. And I also don't think that Israeli is the right term. Israelite would be a better term. We are Yisrael. We are Am Yisrael. We are B'nai Yisrael. That's who we are, period. So a person that says, no, I am not Yisrael, I am Jewish, that person should read the book that describes who he claims to be.
Right, but in Israel, but now the state of Israel, when it defines who is a Jew, doesn't use that book, right?
That's right. I think the state of Israel is not the same thing as Am Yisrael. The state of Israel is imperfect. The state of Israel is wrong about many things, in my humble opinion. One of the things they're wrong about is an inconsistent definition of who is, in fact, a Ben Yisrael. That's correct. I think that they are wrong and inconsistent.
Right. Okay. So now that they're using an inconsistent definition, so maybe you'll say that Zionism, because I don't know how Zionism defines a Jew, right? I don't know if there's such a thing because
it doesn't. Zionism doesn't define a Jew.
No, I'm saying because there's no official handbook of Zionism. You know what I'm saying? So there's no every Zionist had his own views of what the thing's going to look like. Let's just, the
Jews.
Right. Say, but we'll put this aside. Yeah, all those little issues they put aside until we got there, and then when they got there, then they start voting on everything, and everything turned haywire. But so I don't know what Zionism would say is a Jew. But would you now say then that since the state of Israel is not using Israelite as a definition, but really came up with their own, that it's excluding anybody who doesn't have at least one grandparent who's Jewish? Because you can't use it now.
Again, they are being consistent with every country in terms of how they define their citizenry. And I am disagreeing with them as to the parameters of citizenship. I'm saying I agree that every country needs to define who their citizens are. So the United States Constitution does it for this country. It says you could be born on American soil, you could be born to American parents, or you could naturalize. There are 3 ways to be an American citizen according to the Constitution. Fine. Now, similarly, the Israelis also get to decide what constitutes citizenship. Once they decide what constitutes citizenship, they can extend those rules the same way that every other country does. It happens to be that I quibble with them about their definition of a Jew. Yes, I disagree with them. But what they're doing structurally is consistent. I just disagree with where they put the lines.
Right, but they are now excluding people, and not saying, and they are really using. I don't know if they are. I mean, that's a good question.
Well, of course they are. Right, the Mexicans exclude the Guatemalans from voting in Mexico. It's not that they
Right.
hate Guatemala. It's just Mexican elections are for Mexican voters. What's the problem? Right? The Mexican people get to self-determine in Mexico.
Right.
That's all. That's really all it is.
Right. Okay. So now let's now you're going to say that they're by definition they're not racist because Judaism is not a race. So they don't have anything to do with race.
It's not that by definition it's not racist. It's like saying is Judaism, is the state of Israel a Yankee fan or a Met fan? And you're like, what?
Right.
It doesn't compute. So it's like, is Zionism racism? Is Zionism a pineapple? Zionism has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're a Yankee fan. Saying that the Jews have the right to self-determine, is that racism? I don't understand what does that mean?
Right.
Do Canadians have the right to self-determine? Is being Canadian racist? That's a silly question. I mean, again, I know it's 2021, everything's racist. But in the real world where only racism is racism and non-racism is not racist, I have no idea what Zionism would have to do with racism whatsoever.
Right. All right. Yeah. I'm not processing this fast enough. That's my issue, because I hear what you're saying 100%. But like intuitively, I sense that there's something lacking in the argument. I can't put my finger on it. I feel like there's a weakness in the argument that you're making, and that I have no problem with a state being created just for Jews. And even if we would say that, and this is going to sound horrible to certain people, but even if we would say, listen, if you're not, you can live here if you're not part of the Jewish people, but you're not going to have the same rights as everybody else. You have to determine whether or not you want to live like that. And people that say, well, how long, that's apartheid, how could you have two different?
My wife has a green card.
Right. No, so
she can't vote.
Right.
So, not an American citizen. She can live here, but she's not an American citizen. Right. She does not have the same rights that I do.
Puerto Ricans are American citizens.
There you go.
Granted citizenship, and they don't have people who live in Washington, D.C. Right? They're even citizens. They have full citizenship, but not the rights of a citizen. So people, when you challenge people with that, like, oh, America doesn't, then the answer is always, well, America's wrong. So like they don't have, okay, so everybody's wrong. Okay, that's the and then you get to the, you have people that are going to go ahead and say, well, nobody's like they'll come along and say, well, there's no really, the whole idea of borders and nations is a immorality. Why should somebody?
Why?
Well, the argument is, right, by creating borders and nations, especially in certain nations that have natural resources and others don't. So then somebody living in the Democratic Republic of Congo is underprivileged, not to their own fault, from somebody that lives in Miami, right, or Tel Aviv, right? Now the person, right,
and that lack
of equality.
How is that not true?
What?
That's true, right? Israel's the only state in the Middle East without oil. Fact or fiction?
Fact.
Fact. So you're saying, well, is it a privilege to have oil? Yeah. Does that make the earth of Saudi Arabia racist for not giving oil to the earth in Hebron?
No, but what it's saying is that when you create the border around Saudi Arabia and tell everybody in Yemen without oil, you can't come here because we're going to create this border here. So you're going to starve and we're going to live in the lap of luxury, right? So, and what's the difference between that guy in Yemen and the guy in Saudi Arabia is an arbitrary line literally in the sand.
Yeah, that's what borders are. They're agreed upon.
Right, so they're saying, so that's not, that's immoral. In other words, creating that border and
is immoral. And the world would be a much more moral place without borders. So that sounds a lot to me like the people who think that their cities will be a lot safer without police. It's the same people.
One and the same. They're usually
it's the same people. The person
Right.
who thinks that the world will be a kinder place without borders is the same person that thinks Minneapolis will have fewer shootings if they got rid of the police force.
Right.
Okay,
Less guns.
I am prepared. I am prepared for that person to live the way he wants to live, and I will live the way I want to live, and we'll all be happy, or at least I will.
Right. But right. But obviously these people are never going to get their way. But these are the people that we're countering, right? These are the idealists who sit, and the ideologues who sit in the academic spheres, and are able to in the lap of luxury, usually their parents' credit cards, and be able to say, oh, if only the world was much better, and we could correct, But in any case, even right.
Yay! Write a song about it.
Right. So right. But grant that we're on the same page here. Yeah. But the idea is that when it comes back, bringing it back to Israel and bringing it back to Zionism, the idea of creating that state, where one person has more than other people because of their nationality or their peoplehood,
every
identity.
Single state. Every single
some states have less.
State.
Some states have left, and some people are stateless, like
Kurds.
Palestinians.
No.
What state do Palestinians
have? Again, the Kurds are stateless.
Yes.
There are Arabs who are stateless.
Correct.
No such thing, and has never been such a thing as the Palestinian people ever in history. There is no such animal.
For sure, fine. I agree.
The Kurds are stateless. There are Arabs, region, or individual Haitians or individual Americans who are stateless. But the American people are not stateless. The Arab people are not stateless. The Kurds are stateless. The Tibetans are stateless.
Right.
Is that not correct? The Tibetans are not stateless. Maybe I'm wrong about them. I know very little about them.
I'm
pretty sure they're stateless.
Right. What state does an Arab living in a refugee tent in South Lebanon, what state do they belong to?
Sounds like Lebanon.
But they don't. I'm saying they ran into Lebanon, and Lebanon never said, "Hey, come on in."
That's right. Lebanon. That's right. So there are individuals who are stateless. I agree.
Oh, you're saying that's just a fact of life.
It's a fact, period. There are individuals who are stateless, and then there are even peoples who are stateless who shouldn't be. I'm not saying individuals should remain stateless. Like the United Nations, as we said, that wonderful organization, the United Nations refugee arm, one of their mandates is taking these stateless people and giving them a place. They give them a state. That's why. See, this is funny, and obviously you know this because you know a lot more about this stuff than I do. But there is not one United Nations organization that deals with refugees. There are two. There's one United Nations arm that deals with refugees, and then there's one United Nations arm that deals with Palestinian refugees. And you might ask yourself, why is it that 99.9999999% of the world's refugees can all be taken care of in this organization, and this type of refugee needs his own organization with different rules that never finds a state for anybody? Why might that be? And I'll let you answer that question for yourself.
Right. Do you literally want me to answer that?
No.
Okay. I know what you said. Answer for yourself. Okay. I'm still struggling with this. This idea. And on the one hand, you obviously don't want to come down and say that Israel is exclusionary. Your answer to it is no.
No, I'm saying it is exclusionary.
Right. Your answer is You're happy to say that it is exclusionary. It's exclusionary.
I think it's as exclusionary as every other country on the planet Earth.
Right.
That's all it is.
Right. So I guess the question is like this: if you were sitting down with Theodor Herzl, right? And sitting down with Theodor Herzl, maybe Chaim Weizmann's there, maybe he's not because they don't get along, but like you're sitting down with them, Ben Gurion's off in the corner getting a cup of water, and you sit there and say, listen, guys, this is all a great idea, but why don't we create like an America between the Mediterranean and the border of what will be Iraq? And we'll let everybody have a vote, and everybody will be kumbaya, just like they are in America at that point for 180 years at that point. So why can't we do that? Why do you have to create a state just for the Jews?
Again, I don't see the Jews as different than any other people's self-determination. I think that the Italians have a right to govern themselves. The Italians have that right, and so do the Spaniards. They have that right, and the French have that right, and the Russians have that right, and the Bnei Yisrael have that right. Very simple. Very, very simple. Every people should govern themselves.
Right.
That's it. That's all it means. Now, it just so happens that my people would like to govern ourselves in our house. That's where we'd like to be. So Herzl, if I had one thing to say to Theodore Herzl, it would be, "You idiot, Uganda?"
Right.
That would be the one thing. That would be the first thing that I said to Theodore Herzl. Second thing would be like, "That's an awesome beard."
Right. I hear. Okay. Yeah, I think that's I think we've run the gamut of this topic here. Yeah.
I'm so happy that we're back again, feeling man. I missed you. I missed you.
It is very good.
I'm glad.
It's very good. And we should say publicly congratulations on your new role as rabbi of Shechtel. That's very exciting. And I look forward. I'll be there in 2 weeks. We're gonna run a lobbying trip for the Shechtel.
Can't wait to see you.
Yes, and
I have a bottle of Mortlock that's ready for you.
Oh, see that's true love. True love.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, Rabbi Sprung, this has always been a pleasure. Hopefully we'll be on next.
Man.
Hopefully we'll get better graphics behind us. I'm talking, and we'll do a little advertising before. I think this is sort of like a test run almost, for next week's topic. We'll see you then. Okay, and if anybody listening or watching has any suggestions and they want to have next week's topic, we always decide. But we should definitely, we're not set in stone on our topics. We don't have a curriculum, or any ideas really right now. What we
bring it.
So we'd love the suggestions. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Okay, have a very, very good evening.
Peace and love, Philly. That's all, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.